How can you satisfy an Italian? You go out on a date. What's the one thing that satisfy any Italian if done right? Of course, you can do it wrong, but if done right, what's that one thing?
I don't think you can go too wrong with a bottle of wine, a nice location, taking time, not making the other person feel pressure that you have to squeeze a date into like a coffee between job or late breakfast on Sunday. Like, we don't like that. I think the Italian touch to the date, just to say it that way, is the fact that you take the time to enjoy each other's company and you do things that are considered enjoyable by the majority of people, like sharing wine and discussing about life and having a good meal in a really good location with tables outside. We're really lucky that we have such a great weather pretty much the whole year around. Except from January and February, you usually can dine outside like we're doing right now. So you can be outside and have a little bit of wind like we're doing right now. And, just enjoying the whole experience of being in the street with some lights, a candle, whatever. That's very Italian, I'd say.
How open are Italians to dating a foreigner? Maybe certain areas where Italians are more likely to date foreigners than others? Is this like based on provinces? Is it based on cities? You're an Italian, so I'd like to hear.
Hey, that's a really great question. I thought, why we did not cover this before? Because that's really interesting, and I do have a really good answer for all the foreigners out there. As much as it can seem that Italians are very, proud of their roots, and we are 100%, there is like a certain charm from people that live outside of even of the European Union, actually. I mean, just inside the European Union, we feel very familiar with a lot of cultures. Like, we feel very close to French people, Spanish people, Portuguese people. Being in as part of the same union, that's something we are fascinated by them, but we don't consider them foreigners. I mean, of course they are, but they're not from another continent. Whereas we grew up, pretty much me and all of my peers, we grew up watching the US movies and TV and cultures. We were really exposed to that without even knowing that. Canadian culture as well. We were really exposed to all of these things. And people that come here realize, oh, Italians are such a close, mindset, they're a close community, but we're not. We really grew up loving, US TV and US culture, and just someone that speaks English for us is someone that has done something with their life. So all of these qualities that are usually present in a foreigner are very appealing to Italians. So I think the right answer will be that we are more open to the foreigners just because of the charm that they bring rather than our peers. Then, of course, it depends on the foreigner, depends on the connection, on all of these things that dating is about, of course. It has to be taken into account. But aside from that, I think that just the fact that you come from the US and you want to invest in this country and you arrive here and you're like, I just moved here and, I have a property here. I think that would be very appealing to a lot of Italian women, honestly.
And what happens if there's no property?
As long as there's wine, that's good.
Great way to answer that question. As long as there's wine, there's no problem, right? In terms of certain people doing better than others in dating, Italian women or Italian men, right? It doesn't matter. Do you see any preferences? I mean, without pointing out race or anything like that, but if you would say oh, Italians have a preference for certain types of people.
I know that Spanish women are regarded as to be very beautiful. So that's something that Italian men always say. Some of them do love the classic American looking kind of girl, a really tall and blonde girl with blue eyes. That's also something that it's very appealing just because, as you might see, not a lot of us are like that. The opposites always attract to a certain extent. U.S. word, U.S. citizen, any person that has an American accent or that's usually very appealing to people. Or we are really even, fascinated by Southern American in a way just because the cultures are very similar. So that's what I'm saying, opposite attracts, but there is a certain compatibility between similars. So I think that side, the Western side of the world, is a lot looked up to from Italians.
I totally agree with what she's saying about similarities between Latin culture and Italian culture. There are. Family values are highly appreciated in both. Latin America is very family-oriented. It's a collectivist society. And here it is too, but I feel in Latin America it's even stronger. It's really important to get the approval from the family. It doesn't need to be a written approval, right? It doesn't need to be a contract or anything, but it needs to be just, introducing to family and just knowing that your family is in sync with who you're dating. Is that the same in Italian dating culture, or do you say there are some differences?
I would say there are definitely differences, although like it depends on which kind of community you're talking about, because there are a lot of like communities or families even living in the southern part of Italy where it's usually more like a family deal, you know, like you marry into the family, you date into the family, if that's possible. So I feel like in that case, that reasoning could apply. But I mean, I grew up in Rome. I've lived here my whole life. Rome is like a big city. Milan is a more modern city. Here, like dating culture is pretty easygoing, you know, like there's no family approval or anything. Of course, like family approval, I think is like such a good value everywhere, right? Like even if you come from the most further away place from these kind of values, having your family approving the person you're dating, that's also like something that's really well like appreciated from people in general. But it's not a necessary requirement in dating. We came to be very easygoing with dating. I think the dating landscape evolved a little bit in the years. So before we were a very traditional kind of country, and then we kind of grew into being a very relaxed country, appreciating each other's differences. And before, I think, becoming too formal, I think there's no need to put the family in between. But after that, if something is very serious, then yeah, of course, family approval and family like opinion is very important.
So the times when you had to ask your parents for permission to marry are over, correct?
Correct. Very over.
Okay, because I'm just thinking about what my grandfather told me on my mother's side, and he had a little bit of a hard time. You know, you had to get the approval and you had to explain why you wanted to marry that person, and it was more arranged to this today. I mean, arranged things still happen today, but it's not as common as it was back then, you know? So you'd say that in today's world, the average Italian pretty much can make his or her own choice, correct?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I mean, of course, like, there is this tradition. I don't know if it's like that in any of the other countries, but like, the father of the bride usually pays for the wedding, right? I think that's pretty common in Italy. Yeah, I'm not sure if other countries, but I feel like the father of the bride usually pays for the wedding. Or, I mean, right now, I feel like it could easily be split among the two, but like, that's a tradition. And so I think approving someone even comes to be an economical decision at one point, right? Because if I think you're not marrying into a good family, like if you're not marrying a good person, that makes you feel, you know, appreciated and all that. So that's paying, you know, a few like bucks for a wedding. It might be a little bit tricky in that sense. But aside from that, there's no like closure to other people and opportunities. And I think, yeah, that's something that's very recent and involves pretty much the northern part of Italy rather than the south. But also then, like, it involves communities. So let's say in a little southern town, like a young boy wants to marry younger, probably there's going to be parents, you know, in between there and even supporting the decisions or not, depending on the situation. But like, that's something that I think it's circled to that community. It doesn't really involve anyone coming from the outside world. If someone from the outside world comes and wants to date a girl from Rome or a girl from any other city, I think 95% of the case you won't have any family in between. Although like the presence of the mother in this country is pretty intense, so that's something you wanna might consider.
No, the mother does weigh in.
It does. I mean, as in any country though, right? Like,
Influence.
right. I
It's
think
like a political party trying to influence, right?
it is, but I mean, I feel like that's the same in all countries. I feel like the mother figure is important in all the cultures. We are not different than that. But aside from all this, it just belongs to tradition and it doesn't really apply. As you know, like there are stereotypes about all countries, but I feel like they don't really apply once you're here to this, you know, the lifestyle that you actually have once you're in the country.
Now that Susanna explained what it takes to be successful in Italy's dating culture, we want to hear from you. Do you have any experience dating an Italian? Are you looking to date an Italian? What are your thoughts? And if you have any questions, then please feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you for watching.